Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So tonight, I don't want to waste any time, and I want to get into Terrence Howard's philosophical video that he uploaded to YouTube. Now, my introduction to Terrence Howard is by watching him as a phenomenal actor on the big screen, as well as on TV shows such as Empire. And I've seen him in a few blaxploitation films. And so I was surprised to learn that Terrence Howard had taken a philosophical curve and have decided to become what I describe as a sage, putting out very interesting and thought-provoking information and content. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me be clear that there is a lot that Terrence Howard has been saying as of late that I don't necessarily agree with, and how I came across this specific video was on Sabrina Salvati's channel, who reviewed that particular video that I'm reviewing as well. And I think that I have the same opinion as her as it relates to not necessarily not necessarily agreeing with all things that Terrence Howard speaks about, but this particular video that he uploaded is quite sagacious. And so I want to go into those principles that he names, and I want to apply it to my particular situation, living as an asylum seeker in the global north, in Northern Ireland. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the first, I think, principle that he names is, let me see the world as it truly is, not as I was told that it must be. So being an American growing up in the United States, I was told that the world must be fair, that everyone's rights are protected, that judicial systems are effective, that if you go through the judicial system, that you have a fair shot. And growing up hearing this around me as a Black American, being raised in the South and being, I guess, growing up around a racialized society, I have come to understand that that is really not how the world must be, how they're telling me that the world must be fair and just, that the world is unfair and that the world is unjust. And so we're told that the global north is usually United States, or here Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, that these are democracies with checks and balances in place. And I am seeing the world as it really is, that is really not necessarily the truth. And this reminds me of the legal realist perspective, where they look to describe what the law is rather than what the law ought to be. Procedural justice relates to how rules are made and how they are applied. Substantive justice is concerned with the rules themselves, whether or not they are just or unjust. Procedurally, the rules are made to give everyone in Northern Ireland, as well as in the Republic of Ireland, access to the courts. I've come to understand, just by reading and studying the law, that the right to access the courts must be practical and effective. You hear a lot about that on my channel. And for the right this right to access the courts to be effective, a person must have a clear practical opportunity to challenge an act that is an interference to her rights. And sitting with that, I've come to understand that in essence, within the United States, within the Republic of Ireland, as well as in Northern Ireland, that's just not true. That some people don't have a practical opportunity to challenge an act that is in interference with their rights in these jurisdictions. Now, the European Court of Human Rights held the right to access courts is impaired when the rules cease to serve the aims of legal certainty and proper administration of justice, and forms sort of a barrier preventing the litigant from having her case determined on the merits by a competent court. Now, the rules in law are, what I have come to understand is that the rules in law, such as the European Convention on Human Rights, the legislation in Northern Ireland, the legislation in the Republic of Ireland, that all is fair. It's fair. So how the European Convention on Human Rights was drafted, how particular pieces of legislation in the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, how it was drafted is fair. But it's how the system, I think, applies these laws or chooses not to apply them in the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, which makes it unfair. So the second principle that Terrence Howard talks about is let me follow evidence over assumption. And I think for some people that may be difficult to do because a lot of the times, sometimes evidence isn't available. And some may argue, well, all I have is an assumption. All I have is the ability to guesstimate and to come to my own conclusion about what I'm witnessing and what I'm observing. But it's important to note that observations is a form of evidence. The evidence is the procedure applied in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland for those undergoing transnational repression. The evidence is that it is it's a barrier essentially that prevents the litigant from having her case determined on the merits by a competent court. So that is the evidence how the procedure is applied in this jurisdiction. That's the evidence. And you may say, well, what do you mean by that being the evidence? Well, if a procedure is applied in a way that the outcome renders ineffective for a litigant, the application of that procedure by the person who is applying that procedure is the evidence. And let's get to his third principle. Let me engage in observation over expectation. So, to reiterate, observation is a credible piece of evidence. So, for example, if you are a person and you're looking out your window and you see a person get hit by a car, no one is around to testify to that very fact, but you know, because you saw that, your testimony could be useful in the court of law as a credible piece of evidence because you witnessed it and you had a vantage point where you seen the incident take place. Now, building on the idea of let me engage in observation over expectation, only that, what is observation? So only that which can be observed can be measured. So after monitoring the actions of the employees in both jurisdictions, so the employees in the courts and the Republic of Ireland, monitoring the actions of the employees, such as in the central office here in Northern Ireland, scrutinizing their behavior, paying close attention to how they engage with myself and how they engage with other litigants, how they're handling my documents versus how they are handling the documents of other litigants. So I remember one time I was filing a document in one of the offices in the court, and the person at the desk put my document on the floor. And I was like, is that what they do with the documents that are being filed? Like, you're putting it on the floor. And that gave me the impression that my case was not really being taken seriously. And it was just that very small observation, observing how they were handling other documents from other litigants and solicitors versus how they were handling mine. And so I came to understand that there would be no proper administration of justice in Northern Ireland by virtue of how my documents were handled. There was on a couple of occasions where I had asked for the court, or excuse me, the central office to give me a printout of everything that was filed in my case. And that was something that they said that they could not do, which seemed quite odd to me because the case is a new case. So there hasn't been like a significant life in this case. There's just a very short life of this case. And so we haven't gone through interrogatories or depositions. We have not actually had the opportunity. The defendants have not answered or sent their admissions or their denials or counter arguments. If you're unfamiliar with my particular situation, I have brought litigation against Queen's University Belfast, Nisos Group Limited, and the Police Service of Northern Ireland for violating my right to education, among other rights. And so going back to the principles that Terrence Howard names, of course, in his video, that if I had an expectation, if I expected that there would be, like I did in the Republic of Ireland, if I expected that the review would have, if I expected that justice was going to be, there was going to be a proper administration of justice, I think I would have attended the review today. But to reiterate, there were some indications that there was not going to be a proper administration of justice because in this particular situation, the Crown solicitors never sent me any legal arguments, or the person claiming to be Claire Jordan, who I spoke to over the phone, never sent me a skeleton argument of how she didn't send me a skeleton argument of the problem that she found with a Facebook post that I posted on my Facebook account. And I found it quite odd that the court would bring us up for review over a Facebook post that was aligned with the laws in Northern Ireland and not defamatory and not taken out of context, was not threatening in any way, shape, form, and fashion. And so bringing that to a close, my observations showed me that there was not going to be a proper administration of justice. Had I expected there to be and attended the review, what happened in the Republic of Ireland to me might have happened here. So I made the decision to stay home. The fourth principle that Terrence Howard brings to us is let me question every constant, every rule that was handed down, every truth that cannot stand up to scrutiny. Here I think that Terrence Howard means every situation that does not change. So in my particular situation, challenging every constant would be a pattern and a practice where there is a lack of independent solicitors in the Republic of Ireland and lack of independent solicitors here in Northern Ireland, where the Gardaí and the police service, the Gardaí in the Republic of Ireland are not investigating when I'm victimized by acts of transnational repression, where the police service of Northern Ireland is failing to investigate when I'm being victimized by acts of transnational repression, where I have been ostracized and isolated from social structures and groups within the Republic of Ireland, and how I've been ostracized and socially isolated from social structures here in Northern Ireland, where NASC, the Refugee Rights Center in the Republic of Ireland, and other organizations such as Massey in the Republic of Ireland didn't stand up to protect my rights, and where the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission here, as well as other human rights organizations such as the Equality Commission, did not stand up and protect my rights. This is, in essence, questioning every constant. And the truth that cannot stand up to scrutiny is that everyone is, I think, that every person affected by a decision has an opportunity to participate and to challenge that decision, to participate essentially in the decision-making process. That is not necessarily true in USA, that's not necessarily true in the Republic of Ireland, and that's not necessarily true here in Northern Ireland. This is a truth that cannot stand up to scrutiny, that every person, especially those that have filed asylum against the United States, has an opportunity to participate in the decision-making process as it relates to as it relates essentially to their rights. Terrence Howard, he makes clear that this is not rebellion, that this is responsibility. So some would argue that questioning every constant and the truth that cannot be that cannot hold up to scrutiny is a rebellious act, and that it is not the right thing to do. But Terrence Howard argues that this is responsible. This is a responsible act to take. Further, the principle that he says is, let me choose clarity over comfort, precision over persuasion. Clarity here, I think it could be the stratification in the global north. Comfort, I think, could be not to ask questions or to challenge this stratification so as to not bring unwanted attention from the government upon us. So, for example, sometimes when you challenge the government or you ask questions, you challenge the way things are done, you bring unwanted attention upon yourself, which brings you or places you in positions that I'm currently in, such as being intimidated by government officials, information gathering agencies that are putting me through transnational repression. And this all started because I spoke very critically against the judicial system and the criminal justice system in the United States as it relates to Black Americans. I spoke critically about no-knock warrants. I spoke critically about extrajudicial executions very publicly, and spoke very critically about what I would call the deception happening in the Republic of Ireland as it relates to the direct provision institution. He also tells us, let us choose understanding over tradition. And I think that tradition here is defending the status quo, because the status quo seeks continuity with the past. And what happened in the past? Well, in the past, Black people did not have a say in court. Black people's testimony was looked at as not creditable. White people, if they said something in the past, if they made an allegation against a Black person, that allegation was to be looked at as true. It was axiomatic, right? Whereas time has changed, and that control and hegemonic influence has begun to evaporate. And not only has it begun to evaporate, but has begun to lose its grip on marginalized communities such as Black Americans. And I think reflecting deeply on that is the understanding here. Choosing understanding over that tradition that the authority figures in these jurisdictions seek to hold on to. To be sure, Edmund Burke argues society is founded on a contract, but not by who is alive today, not by anyone who is alive today. So, of course, when we look at the past, society and constitutions and laws were made by mainly white men. And it was only through time where marginalized communities or minorities had a say in developing law and creating law. But I think when we look at this and we really pinpoint it, that some societies, such as the United States and possibly here in Northern Ireland and definitely in the Republic of Ireland, there is a desire to take us back to how it used to be, where people like me were enslaved and didn't have a say and was controlled and managed by a white person was kept in chains, was whipped when and if I got out of control, was lynched if I decided to run for freedom. I think that there is a desire choosing understanding over tradition, that there is a desire observing what has taken place over what I expect to happen, expecting justice, right? Some people expect that not to be the case, that expecting things to change. But when you observe it, you come to the realization that it has not changed. And so the realization, building on the idea that it has not changed, that leads to the conclusion also that there may be a desire to take us back to a point in time where people like me didn't have a voice, and people like me were and could be put in a place by a person with white skin. Now, this is a lengthy explanation, and I don't have to reiterate, I don't have enough time to talk about this in this video. And I know that the rebuttals to this as well, so the rebuttal to this contract is lengthy as well. But what I'm essentially, I think what it essentially sums up to is the survival of the fittest, right? So the person who is the fittest survives in this kind of society. But ladies and gentlemen, when you pit multiple people up against one person, I don't think that that is a survival of the fittest. I think that that is not being able to compete on a level playing field. That is moving the goalpost far from reach for a person who is competing fairly in a competition or a race. And I want to get into that in another video. I don't have enough time to talk about that in this video, but I want to get into how the dominant society moves the goalpost, how they cheat to win, how they engage in criminality to win. And had an ordinary person like us, had we engaged in behavior like that, we'd be put in jail. So it's interesting to reflect on that. Lastly, Howard says, may my mind remain open, may my reason be disciplined, and may my pursuit of justice remain fearless. And I think that that is what I'll do, is I'll keep an open mind about the judicial process here. My reason about this is going to be disciplined, but my pursuit of justice in all respects is going to be fearless. And ladies and gentlemen, I think the video is going to cut off. There you have it. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, like it if you found it interesting. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.